working? Hello? It's working.
You look like you're going to ask hard questions.
I can ask hard questions from there.
Oh, okay. Maybe I just don't listen that well from back there.
Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Expo seminar. Today, talking about spreadsheets, apps, and software for your dairy. My name is Preston Vincent, and I'm the VP of Sales for VAS, and we're proud sponsors of this seminar. Today, you're going to learn a little bit about how technology is available to the dairy industry, or technology is available to our dairy industry. Technology available to the dairy industry is rapidly evolving from platform updates to new options, but what is the best fit for your operation? Dr. Larry Tranel, Jen Bentley, and Fred Hall will discuss useful decision-making spreadsheets, favorite apps for dairy and personal use, and dairy herd management software options that are useful in your day-to-day farm operations. The tag team of presenters work closely together as part of the Iowa State University Extension Dairy Field Specialist Team, focus on supporting dairy farmers by creating and vetting dairy farm technology tools and more. This seminar will focus on useful decision-making spreadsheets, including the Dairy Trans program, Dairy Farm Value Calculator, Share Milk tool, and a resource list of other spreadsheets of interest. Popular dairy herd management software will also be shared, along with survey results of dairy farm networks and their favorite apps and technology. Again, thanks for coming, and I'll turn it over to Jen.
All right, thanks Preston, and thanks to VAS for sponsoring this Expo seminar. My name is Jen Bentley. I'm going to kick off our seminar here this afternoon, and my colleagues Fred Hall and Dr. Larry Tranel will follow up. This will be kind of a lightning talk round, so we'll get through as many apps and spreadsheets as we can in about 45-50 minutes. So have fun and enjoy the apps that we're going to talk about here today. So first, before we get started, this is going to be a little homework on your end. We're actually going to be asking you a question before we start talking about apps. And so I'm going to load up this, what we call a Slido app, and it's virtually going to ask you a question. You're going to respond. So give me a second to get that pulled up here. And funny that the internet is down in the whole building, so I had to use my hotspot here to get on here. But so you'll notice here is a screen. It has a QR code. How many of you have a QR reader on your phone? Quite a few. So go ahead and pull up your phone. You should be able to scan that. If you don't have a reader on your phone, you can go to the slido.com, and then it'll be hashtag WDE 2021. And then you'll enter in the passcode. I'll give you a second to get that loaded up.
And the passcode is just WDE.
Yeah, the passcode is not a hashtag. It's just passcode WDE 2021. Everybody find it okay? Okay. What's that?
The signal's bad, but so somebody uses bubble to bubble it.
Okay. Okay, so as you enter them in, it should populate onto this screen here. So once you hit the send button, I'm hoping they'll pop up. Okay, so we got some here. So ones that were already voted on here were Mile IQ, which I think, Fred, you're going to talk about that one later. Bubble used to level my deer stand. So we have some deer hunters in the room? One? Okay, we're in Wisconsin. Google, so it must, So lots of applications, WhatsApp, team communication, Facebook, Outlook for work. Got some fantasy football going on, Instagram, telling stories, entertainment. Let's see if there's any other ones out there. So your banking app. Probably don't want to get into football teams as we go in here. So Fitbit, oh, there's the Packer app, okay. So Uber, yep. So a lot of different apps that people are using. And if you haven't entered in one, how about a dairy app? Anybody have a special dairy app on your phone? I think you can enter in more than one if you want. Stocks, so watching your markets, Quick Trip. My Radar for weather. Got Dairy Comp, DC on mobile, your camera. So the VAS Pulse platform, yep. Cow Manager. Yep, so now we're getting some dairy apps on here. Good, so that's, this was actually a new app for us to use, an extension. I just think it's kind of fun because it's interactive and you can see the answers populate right away on your computer as we present here. So, let me put this back. All right, so as you can see, there's an app for just about everything, right? If you've been in the exhibit hall here today, you probably saw many of these booths and probably stopped by a lot of them. When I did some survey work with our producers, this is one of the things I asked them was, what kind of software do you have on your phone for your dairy apps? And a lot of these were populated as answers. So you can see Moo Monitor, Bovasync, using the RFID wand, Cow Manager, I think somebody else had in the room, the PC Dart, Rumination Activity, VAS with Dairy Comp, Feed Supervisor, Feed Watch, Gen X Dairy, and a lot of our robotic dashboards are being used. So, and again, if you go out to the exhibit hall, there's probably double these out there that I don't even have on this list yet. So just about everybody has an app. So one of the other things that I asked in my survey was how you're using spreadsheets, and basically the number one spreadsheet that a lot of them are using is Google Sheets. How many of you use Google Sheets here? Quite a few of you, okay. So a lot of them use them different ways on the farm as a monthly tracking system for either heifer inventory, maybe they're tracking fresh cows, if they have deaths on the farm, if they have some feeder cattle sales, keeping track of milk yield and their components, fresh cows, employee management, so keeping track of employees as well as vacation. It's a way of communication too, because these are Google Live sheets, so more than one person can be inputting into these sheets at one time. So I just found it really interesting that there's just a multiple ways of using Google Sheets on here. Does anybody have any comments or additions to this list? Yeah?
On our team, we do some scheduling also. It doesn't
Okay.
get into a lot of detail, but you can still update the schedule and everybody can see who's on for what project.
Great.
over the course of the month.
Yep. That's a good employee management tool. So speaking of that, going into communication, that was one of our questions, was about communication. How do you work with your employees or people on your farm? There's a couple different ways. One that I looked into was this Trello app. Had a producer tell me they don't use any more whiteboards in the barn anymore, in the milking parlor or anywhere else on the farm. It's all, every employee has this Trello app on their phone, and the lists are specific to those certain employees. So if they have a barn fix list, then that list goes to those specific employees and they can check those tasks off and know that those are completed. So it's a way that you can share tasks to your employees. It's maybe a quicker way as long as everybody has, you know, that ability to have a smartphone to download those apps. again, another communication app that we ran across, and actually this is used at the ISU dairy farm, is an app called GroupMe. And so they can group their employees by the different types of barns. So right here is the lactating barn group chat. So this is just an example of how they're communicating, talking about tonight's night crew. There's a list, for the cows there. If anybody's looking for more hours, has free times in the afternoon, power washing, and then, could anyone possibly milk for me on Saturday morning? So, it's real quick, responsive. You got a group that's specifically focused to one barn. They can be interactively working together and chatting like back and forth to that group. Anybody use GroupMe app? Okay. The other one that was common on our phones is either a Notes app or Evernote app. Notes is more common to the iPhone app, and Evernote can be used for both iPhone and Android. But one I found interesting was a way to keep track of calf health. So here in their notes, they put in the date, the calf number, they took the temperature of the calf, they had a treatment, or if they tubed electrolytes, what they did with that calf, and then they're able to, share that with other people on the farm as a way to, hey, you're coming in for this next shift, here's a calf I treated, this is what I did this morning, here's what you can do. Or it can be a running list of tracking calf health on your Notes app. So that was the number one way that I found that people were using their notes for dairy purposes. Another way was monitoring employees and making reference notes. So, as they're working with employees on the farm, they catch something that they're doing good, or maybe they could work on, and instead of forgetting what do I need to review with that employee, they put it in their notes. So when they have a review with employees, they can go back and refer to those things that happen on specific days. So just again, it's another quick, easy way to make sure that they can monitor their employees. And again, lists. A lot of people use it for lists, supplies, inventories, repairs, what needs to be done on the farm. So these are all University of Wisconsin apps. These are all Apple products, but I've used quite a few of these in my extension and working on a farm throughout my career, and they just seem to be very handy. Some of them are free and some of them you have to pay for, but the ones that I've used in extension is this freestall assessor. So you're able to put in the dimensions of the freestall and be able to tell if you're within industry benchmarks. With that dairy, the calf health scorer actually goes through and gives you the, are the eyes sunken? Are they dehydrated? What's their manure look like? Temperature, so that you can be able to easily track what your calves are doing in your barn and be able to look at physical pictures on your phone and compare those to your calves. So those are two that I have found to use. There's also a locomotion score, so you can monitor your cows as you're walking out of the barn and be able to look at those cows as they're walking out of the parlor and give them a quick locomotion score. Then you have a good representation of your animals in your barn. Any other ones? Has anybody used any of these other ones on here? Larry?
Pre-fresh pen size.
Yeah, the pre-fresh size calculator, that's also another good one, because then you can put in your herd size, the number of animals that you have freshening, and it actually gives you the benchmarks for what square footage you should have for different stages of that pre-fresh animal.
Again, it's true that some of these are available, not just apps, but they're available for programs as well.
The health apps are actually iPad and iPhone, so just only Apple products at this point. I haven't found that they're on any laptop type. So this one is not an app, but it's one that came from our ag engineer, Brian Doherty, with ISU Extension. He uses it quite a bit out in his work. It's a Seek thermal imaging camera. So it's actually an attachment that you can attach to your phone. It's compatible with most smartphones, and exactly what it says, it's a thermal imaging camera, and I'm going to show you here what that looks like.
Keep in mind, again, you have to have your emissivity setting kind of dialed in depending on what kind of surface you're looking at. But right now on a bare soil surface. I'm getting a reading somewhere around 90 degrees. So that's pretty close to the 1-inch soil temperature reading we had earlier with the dial. And now come over here, look at the temperature difference when we get into that vegetation. Now again, that's not reading the soil surface, that's reading more of a leaf temperature. So we'll come over here, see if I can get down in here, get a better look at the soil surface. You know, still getting a pretty low reading there. I suspect it's probably higher than that. But again, I just wanted to give you a quick demo on these thermal imaging cameras. They're kind of fun to play around with. Great way for using these to assess temperature differences.
So we thought that one was a pretty neat tool. It's easily accessible to most of our smartphones. Another way that we could use it is, you know, once you have you open up your bunkers, that you could use that thermal imaging to see where you have some heating going on your bunker sidewalls. That's where I would maybe use it more than this way too. Lux Light Meter is another app that we found to be very useful. Maybe if you're an industry representative going out on a farm and working with a lot of different dairies, this is a good way to monitor light quality within different areas of the barn, because we know we need different foot candle levels in different areas of the barn. So, you know, when we talk about getting into that parlor pit area and near the udder, we want more lighting. When we get into that milk room, milking parlor again, coming in, we need a lot of foot candles there. So it's just a quick, easy way to have that on your phone and be able to determine, do we need more lighting on your farm? And my last slide is sharing the dairy story through social media. So any TikTok users in here? Got one? All right. I bet if I asked the FFA students out in the exhibit hall, all of them would raise their hand, because that's kind of the generation that is using TikTok. But we're finding that dairy producers that are educating through TikTok are really reaching a lot of people this way. So we actually have 2 producers here in Iowa that are using this as a way to talk about their dairy farms and educate those consumers, responding to questions very quickly. And so I just have 2 videos here. The first one is just about a 30-second. It was more of a fun one versus maybe an educational, but it's still.
Honey, do you like crystal gel for your nail? It's the best thing you can have for your nail. Make look nice. It sparkle like diamond in the sky. Do you like crystal gel?
So you can see it was hoof trimming day there, and she did have a few more videos that talked about the process of hoof trimming and why we hoof trim, but she also made it fun for people that were watching that as well.
How many views?
Yeah, I was going to ask, how many views do you think she got on that?
I guess 5 million.
You knew the answer. So she had 5.5 million views just on that little what, 30-second video. So a lot of views. I think she's got close to 500,000 followers right now. And then the other one, this one is more educationally, talks about his freestall design.
Let's talk about why our freestalls are designed the way they are. A ton of university studies and research has gone into designing these stalls in these exact dimensions. If a cow is laying down in a stall and she wants to get up, she needs what's called enough lunge space. Did you notice how when she stand up, her head lunged forward? She needs enough space in front of her where she can do that. She wants to lay down, but she sees there's not enough lunge space to get back up. She might not lay down. We also use what's called a brisket locator, otherwise a tire. Many of you have asked what that tire is for. That makes it so it's 72 inches from that tire to the back of the curb. Between that and this neck rail, which is right here, that makes it so when they crap, just like that cow just did, it doesn't land in the sand, it lands in the alleyway. You can see her butt hangs off a little bit, her butt's hanging off, her butt's cutting it a little close, but when they crap, it's gonna fall here instead of there. There's another great example. The neck rail makes it so she can't go too far forward, and then the urine lands where it's supposed to. This keeps the sand nice and dry, which means we have happy cows. Just another reason cows love this barn.
So again, just another example of how our dairy producers are using social media to explain to consumers why we do the things on our farm that we do. So it's just another good avenue as we take a look at those younger generation of smartphone users. So Fred, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next lightning talk. And do you want to use that?
Yep, sure will. Okay, let me get out of the sun there. What this is, how many of you guys are the little gray? Do you remember the web soil survey, the books we had to go through? Yep. Well, this is kind of the modern version of that. The left side is the app. The right side is the actual website. When you stand in one spot and you open that app, it tells you what is below your feet within about 2 meters. So if you're out in the alfalfa field and you've got this big yellow spot, first thing you may want to go and say, what's the soil underneath? Is it clay pan? What do we have going on? If you're on the website, you can map your field. You can give the points where the edges are, and you can see that it gives you basically the same information just as it tracks out in your field. Good information to have if you're considering a new lagoon. You can look up there and it'll give you the idea, is this the right spot for the lagoon? This is probably my favorite new app. I had a mileage logger a few years ago, but it was an energy hog. It would burn that battery right down by 2 o'clock. So when this one became available, I can drive from right on the Nebraska line to here and still have 70% of my battery there. So I like that part of it. What it allows me to do is to, at the end of the day or the end of the week, I open it up and I can scroll off to the side. Okay, this is a personal mile, this is a business mile. And the paid inventory or paid version will even let you have several business categories. So as a dairy producer, if you've got a truck that works on the dairy, works in your agronomy side, works with the hog house, you can actually identify your miles there. Then at the end of the week or month, we can, you print out the category or the spreadsheet, and you can see in September 15th, I had a business expense, drove to George, visited dairyman, got my miles there, and at the end of the month, I can turn that in to the university for the mileage that I've done.
Sounds like you're using a stolen vehicle there.
Yeah. I did not put my vehicle in. It's on my phone. I don't need it. But categories a lot of information for you if you need that. This is kind of, I guess you maybe call it a fun one, but because I travel all of western Iowa, I can't always just buy gas at my home gas station. So it gives you the ability to open it up, and it's linked to your maps, so it knows where you are, and it'll give you, okay, in East Emmitsburg, these are the 3 gas stations, and here are the prices. Coming across yesterday, fueled up, got about halfway here and said I'm going to fuel again before I get that gas that may be a little more expensive than I'm used to in Wisconsin, and opened it up. It was $3.09 right on the interstate, but Sam's Club a mile off was $2.68. So certainly was worth the time. But yeah, not everybody's going to use it, but everybody buys gas. It's pretty handy there. University of Wisconsin has the hay pricing app. I think one of the best, as we've talked about it, you can put your state in, you can put your forage in, you get 3 cuttings or 4 cuttings or 5 cuttings. It gives you the yield distribution. You can adjust that. Then on the right side, you can see what the total value is, identifies harvest cost. Where I use it, when the phone call comes in, what's my crop worth? You can see that estimated standing value, 474. So that gets used a lot especially in the spring for me. Now the other thing that I'm tying to that, what I call a mechanicals app, is these ag tools. You can have 7 pages of apps on your phone, and eventually you figure out where all of them are when you scroll through. Or you can have ag tools, and it gives you a full list, and they do the due diligence to keep it up to date. So if something's been updated and the version you have isn't, there as well. You can scroll through there. A lot of these aren't necessarily dairy specific, but most of these are ones that at some point you probably will be using. Then the bug identifier. The last couple of years, I've had a lot of questions. I'm in an office where we don't have a horticulturalist or an agronomist, so when that leaf comes in and it's got a bug on it, we try to figure it out. And I think this is the most accurate one that I've come across. You take a picture of it, or you scan the bug, and 99% of the time it has a single answer. Here's the bug. I've had a couple of times when I was using it in West Texas where it gave me a couple options, but I think this, if you ever are interested in knowing what it is that's in your granary or around your commodity barn, I think this will do an excellent job. And depending upon the insect, sometimes it'll give you a class of chemical that you can actually eliminate it with. Along that same vein is the picture this plant identifier. A lot of times when I'm doing alfalfa peak in the spring and I'm seeing weeds that I'm not familiar with, I can kind of separate it out and shoot the picture. If I'm kind of reasonably close, these would be kind of the examples of what you've got to have. Then it'll identify what that particular weed or plant, they call it plant, I call them weeds, and it'll give you a lot of information as far as what's their native area and give you some idea of is it invasive, is it flown in by a bird, or just exactly what it is. This one I use quite a bit when I'm trying to figure out what have we got going for size here. I discovered real quick I wanted to use it to measure a barn. It won't work that far, but I can measure the free stall. If cows are not laying where they need to be, I'm pretty simple. The first thing I do is let's see where that neck rail is. Let's see where that lunge board is. And this gives me the ability to click on that, and it's pretty hard to argue when you can show them, well, here's the numbers. Now it's a good doctor.
I think I've got my own here, so I'll take this.
Fred, can you hear me okay? I think it came on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm kind of a spreadsheet junkie from back in the 90s, and I'm going to take a look at just probably the biggest way that I think I've helped dairy farmers make a lot of money is actually taking their numbers through some spreadsheet type apps, and so that's what I'm going to work with. So not just determining profit, but just looking at their labor efficiency. And actually, if anybody's ever followed my Millionaire Model Farms, which I've had since the 1990s as well, that all came from a guy in New Zealand who actually showed me his financial graph one time. So I developed a program off of it. And then how do we kind of benchmark type thing? So the thing I really like about spreadsheets is that I can make multicolored type stuff. And so I can actually take these 10 things on somebody's farm. and I can have a pretty darn good feel what's happening on that farm just by looking at these 3 numbers. So red is good, red is bad, yellow is kind of in the middle, and green is good. And so when you take a look at a dairy farm like this, the only one that shows up red is an operating profit margin. And so when you take a look at what types of dairies have the higher operating profit margins, they tend to be our grazing and organic dairies, okay, but the ones that have the big asset turnover ratios tend to be our confinement operations, but this one's actually flipping it. This is actually a grazing operation on this one. So all these pictures are actually coming from the Tranel family farms. I got to give them credit because otherwise I've got a copyright issue. So when you take a look at profitability in people's farms, I think one of the biggest things is just how do we try to benchmark your farm and benchmark your numbers, and spreadsheets are so easy for us to be able to do that, and I don't think it takes that much skill. So using spreadsheets is kind of like a computer code on in itself, where you can build a lot of programs where it'd be very simple or very complex or whatever. But so this one is actually basically just taking a look at the incomes on the farm and looking at the farmers here in the blue per hundredweight equivalent, per hundredweight equivalent of energy corrected milk, per cow basis, and try to give some benchmarks or whatever. So it's really simple. By the time you take a look at what that data is for the farm in dollar value, the spreadsheets can actually help us try to decipher a lot of things on these as well. So we get a net cash income, we change it for inventory, and when I basically say something like this, I'll tend to say net cash income. So people use cash income, they use their Schedule F, and they use other things to try to determine their profitability. And I would basically take a look at you're kind of like the end of the first quarter of a basketball game. You really don't have a clue if you made money yet or not, okay? So we can take it and then change it for inventory. You got some net farm income down here, which is kind of like the halftime of the basketball game. We still don't know if we made money or not. We take a look at the equity charges, whether you own it or the bank owns it, and then we get a return to labor. And that's about the end of the third quarter, because we still don't know how much money we made, because we don't know if that's 3 people working or 2 people working that haven't been paid. So there's a lot of different things we can take a look at on spreadsheets. So I tend to say, let's electrify how we look at profits on our farm, and I think spreadsheets can actually help us do this. Okay, so this is a great nephew of mine that I love that picture. Okay, so there's a lot of farmers out there that don't like to, so this is a full cost of production right here, income of $18.50, what they get for their milk, total expenses at $17.59, so they have a net profit of 91 cents after all their labor and after all their equity. So this is a profitable operation. But some operation or farmers just say, well, I don't care if I make, my equity gets charged. Okay, I don't like to just donate my assets to anybody. Okay, but if that's the way they want to look at it, then it's $16.57. Some don't like to use their unpaid labor as a cost. Okay, if they don't do that, it's still $1.97. Some people don't like to use their equity or their labor as a cost, which I don't appreciate people doing that. But if that's the way you want to do it, then you've got $3 excess. So we've got people that are producing money or milk for that. So when you take a look at it, I know this is a lot of numbers, but again, what I want to show is just on these spreadsheets about how many things you can calculate, because all I'm doing is taking a beginning and ending net worth and using a Schedule F and maybe a little bit of production data, and I can do a full financial analysis on somebody's farm. So on all these things of how efficient they're using labor, how efficient they are on a per cow basis, how efficient they are on a per crop acre basis. Okay, so again, the farmers, the goal, what I would tend to say is a benchmark average, and how far that farmer is between the average and the goal. And so when people take a look at graphs and different types of graphs you can use in spreadsheets, the ones that I really like are the ones that I can just put right within the cell of the bar, or the bar graph right within the cell of that, which I think is kind of cool. So this one's actually ranking out over about 100% of just about every one of those. I don't let it go over 100%, but this is a very nice operation that we're working with here. So we also do this 16 financial questions, Shelley?
What kind of spreadsheet is this?
It's called Dairy Trends. So it's a spreadsheet we created back in, actually in the 1990s when I was still back here in Wisconsin. So the 16 plus of financial ratios, okay, so we get a return on assets, and we can take a look at all these different financial ratios. And when I look at top line profits, basically I'm looking at the return on assets, I'm looking at the operating profit margin and the asset turnover ratio. I really don't pay attention to the rest of them. Okay, I'm just looking at profitability, not so much the cash flow. So you multiply the profit margin by the asset turnover ratio. Anybody know what you get? You'll get your rate of return on assets. Okay, so that's what I call those the big three working with it. So we can kind of benchmark all the financial ratios as well on a farm, do all the graphs, give them a profit rating. Down here, this one ranks out about 85%, which again is very good with that. So the other neat thing, you can take some of the same data And so I had, actually Organic Valley actually took a lot of the data I did on some of these organic farms. And you know, people complain all the time about what feed cost per cow is. Okay, and I'm trying to show a correlation, that total labor cost per hundredweight equivalent. Look at the correlation there. So we did total feed purchase costs per hundredweight, and look how the small correlation of that. So people complain about the feed costs all the time. I tend to say labor efficiency, but it's just an example of a lot of different ways you can use graphs within spreadsheets to work with the system. So has anybody seen this graph before? Okay, so I was in New Zealand back in 1993. And working with consulting with this dairy farm. And this guy shows me his graph of where he started with his net worth back when he was 18 years old, where it was now that he was about 35, 36, and where it's going to be when he's 65. So then he asked me for my graph, and I didn't have a graph. Do you guys got a graph? I'd encourage you to get a graph. It's kind of cool. Okay, but this is how we built this millionaire model farm, that we could actually show younger producers how they become a millionaire in the dairy industry over the course of 25 years. So these points are right here is just an example of somebody that was up to the $350,000 stage. Actually would have been up here, so that as we enlarged it, these things didn't get moved. But this should actually be about $350,000. He became a millionaire at about 14, but I've had a lot of these that just really have some graphs, but they had a picture when they were young in their dairy careers about where they're going to be 25 years down the road, and actually did quite well with it. So moving on to other types of spreadsheets. So I'm kind of a junkie that anytime people ask me to do something, we'll call it economics of robotic milking, or economics of automatic calf feeders, or economics of manure management. This is one that's actually on robotic milking. So if you're going to put in a robot, what's going to happen? There's a lot of variables that are going to be at play here. So we'll take a look at a spreadsheet, a number of cows, the mailbox price, the repair costs, and things like that. So I'm just going to move down through these real quickly, how long that robot's going to last, the interest rate on money, just to kind of get a feel for a few of these, what your milk production is now, what you expect it to increase, somatic cell count, cull rates, and things like that. And so what we'll do is actually take all those variables and put them into this spreadsheet, which is basically a partial budget type spreadsheet. So the positive impacts here with the increased milk production. So we get our total increased incomes, the decreased expenses. So we get a total decreased decreased expenses. We've got our increased expenses. So 172,000 decreased incomes, we couldn't think of any there. So the profitability of putting in these 3 robots on this farm compared to what the farmer was doing actually kind of was about kind of a net zero, but it's $1,400 positive. Okay, and so people also think that the quality of life is actually worth quite a bit as well, so we'll add that kind of into it. So we can use this partial budget to look at the profitability of it, and we'll have a second spreadsheet because we realize that profitability and cash flow are definitely 2 very drastically different things. Okay, so how's this going to affect the cash flow? So our profit-wise, we were plus 1472. We've got a recovery cost on the depreciation and interest of the robots. Then we also have the annual payments. So the banker's going to make us pay this, but this is really what it's depreciating. So we have a difference of a negative 32,000 that we've got to come up with because we've got to pay the bank. Okay, that we didn't look at in the profit analysis here. So other things that were saved, sometimes we save a lot of labor putting the robots in, but sometimes that was my own labor and I wasn't paying myself. Okay, so now I've got to come up with cash for that. So the cash flow change is actually a negative $42,000, even though the profitability was actually a positive 14. So when people ask, can you financially afford a robot, what's the answer? You got to plug in your numbers. It depends. And are you talking cash flow? Are you talking profitability? What's going on here? Okay, so a couple other ones. Egg decision maker. When we take a look at spreadsheets, does anyone want to venture to guess how many spreadsheets are actually on Egg Decision Maker? It's got to be 500 plus probably. Okay, there's just a lot of spreadsheets. So anything you can think of that you need to make a decision on, I bet somebody's already thought of that's a spreadsheet on Egg Decision Maker. So you can Google that. It's from Iowa State University. So here's just a few of the topics with crops, some of the cost and return, storage markets, outlooks, prices, machinery. There are a lot of budgets out there and also some outlook type things on the whole farm basis. You know, if you're leasing, whether it be machinery, cropland, whatever, land values, some taxes, things in there, weights and measurements. I know with the co-op and renewable energy, there's a few like that, but just anything you can think of, I bet there's a pretty good spreadsheet on Ag Decision Maker. So these are probably the 5 most popular ones on grain bid price comparison. Cost of production calculators, farm bill payments, that one gets used a lot, especially by our farm management staff in working with farmers. Machinery cost calculator, leasing, so if you're going to buy versus lease, like some machinery and things like that. But those are just some really popular ones that they pull off of there. Okay, the next one's the Midwest Cover Crops Council. It's cover crop decision tool. We just put this one in just as an example, is that there are a lot of small programs, spreadsheets, to help with whatever decision you make. So as you Google some of these things, a lot of times you might get a list of things coming up here. So where's your farm at? We put this one in Iowa, Winneshiek County, so this must be Jen's farm. Or up by Jen. So are your goals, you just want an erosion fighter. Your current crop is corn silage. You're going to select a planting date, a harvest date, drainage options, flooding options, no flooding there. And so you put those things in and you're going to come up with something like this. And so the reliable establishment is kind of in the green. The freeze moisture risk is in the yellow. When you take a look at the numbers here, 4 is going to be an excellent possibility for that. 3 very good. The 2 good, the 1 fair, and the 0's poor. There's no 0's or 1's up here, but when you take a look at what we're going to make for a decision, depending on where we're going to plant it, we can kind of take a look at some kind of a tool like that as well. On our website, and this is actually our website that has a whole host of a lot of different programs and just resources that we have as a dairy team, but there's actually 9 organic dairy budgets, there's 8 pasture budgets and conventional budgets that are together. So about 17 different dairy budgets. So we put this together because back in the day when people would ask us for a dairy budget, we had one dairy budget that we might be able to change the milk production or something like that, or the milk price on, but there's so many different variables on there, we just decided we're going to create quite a few budgets to take a look at. And so I think that's kind of the end of it. So we actually got through this a little faster than we even thought. So, but as we take a look at whether it be the apps, the spreadsheets, and just a whole host of things, and I think like Jen said, if you walk around here, there's about 6 or 7 different apps that I just picked up. Well, maybe we should have included that one, or should have included this one, or this one's a competitor to this one. And I think one of the biggest things we want to mention is that we don't endorse any of these except the Iowa State ones and the ones that come from the universities. So if, when you take a look, there's other options for some of these apps and things like that that you can work with as well. So with that, I think we'll just call it there. But does anybody have any other comments from Fred or Jen, or questions from the audience? Or other popular apps that you think we kind of missed? Here's a question.
On the breeding side with genetics, is that something that's still being developed, or there isn't many apps?
So breeding and genetics, you guys might know more about that than I am. I'm sure there's a lot of apps out there because I know a lot of farmers are using, but a lot of that stuff would come through their dairy comp, the PC, their association, PC Dart, or from the herd breed type thing. So yeah, they're definitely out there. In fact, that might actually be one of the major things that people use, is some of the breeding type stuff. Question back.
Are those spreadsheets downloadable, or is it data you have to go online and plug in and you get?
I think from Ag Decision Maker, I think almost all the spreadsheets on Ag Decision Maker are available as downloads. And in addition, and you guys can help me out on this, but in addition, on the right side, there's actually PowerPoints available, and there's actually teaching tools available of how to use the spreadsheet. So there's a lot of resources, I think, on Ag Decision Maker. For the dairy trans one, that's one that actually comes out for me, Dubuque County Extension Office. So there's actually a $100 charge for that. But with that, if somebody does buy that, I'll actually work with you the first year to actually get your numbers in, because sometimes there's a few things that might be easy to make a mistake with. So I want to make sure you're using it right if you are going to use that one. So, any others? Okay, and we'll be around here for a little bit too if anybody has any individual questions they want to ask. But again, thanks to VAS for sponsoring it. Thanks to World Dairy Expo for inviting us to speak, and have a good day.